In the heart of the Bitterroot Mountains, where the pines whispered secrets older than time and the wind carried the scent of wild sage, a woman named Alara lived in a cabin perched on the edge of a granite cliff. Her home was a sanctuary of solitude, its weathered timbers blending into the landscape as if grown from the earth itself. Alara was no ordinary recluse. Her hair, streaked with silver, framed eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian, sharp and knowing. She was a healer, a keeper of forgotten lore, and a friend to creatures most would flee from. Her closest companion was not human but a lynx named Sable, a creature of shadow and sinew, whose amber eyes held a wisdom that rivaled her own. Sable had come to Alara a decade ago, a half-starved kitten abandoned by a mother lost to a hunter's trap. Alara nursed her with milk warmed over a fire, stitched her wounds with thread spun from nettle, and taught her to trust again. Over the years, Sable became more than a pet. She was a partner, a silent sentinel who prowled the forest with Alara, guarding her as she gathered herbs or sat by the river, listening to its endless song. Their bond was unspoken, forged in quiet moments. The brush of fur against skin, the shared warmth of a hearth, the mutual respect of two souls who understood the wild. One frostbitten morning in late autumn, when the sky was a bruise of gray and the air stung with the promise of snow, Sable returned from her dawn patrol with something extraordinary. In her jaws, dangling by the scruff, was a tiny bobcat cub, its fur matted and its eyes barely open. Behind her, stumbling through the underbrush, came two more, mewling pitifully, their paws unsteady on the frost-slick ground. Alara knelt, her breath catching as she saw their frailty. They were orphans, likely abandoned after a predator or poacher claimed their mother. Sable set the first cub at Alara's feet, her gaze steady, as if to say, "These are ours now." Alara hesitated. Bobcats were not lynxes. They were wilder, fiercer, their instincts honed by a lineage of solitary hunters. Raising them would be no small task, and releasing them back to the wild would be fraught with peril. Yet Sable's insistence was unshakable. She nudged the cubs toward the cabin, her low growls a command Alara couldn't ignore. So, with a sigh and a flicker of curiosity, Alara scooped them up, their warmth seeping through her gloves, and carried them inside. She named them Ember, for the fiery spark in her eyes, Thorn, for the prickly defiance in his stance, and Mist, for the way she seemed to blend into the shadows. The cabin, once quiet, became a chaotic symphony of hisses, yowls, and the clatter of overturned bowls. Sable took her role as surrogate mother seriously. She disciplined the cubs with gentle nips, taught them to pounce on pine cones, and curled around them at night, her warmth a shield against the cold. Alara, meanwhile, learned to adapt. She brewed nutrient-rich broths, carved toys from cedar, and spent sleepless nights ensuring the cubs thrived. The forest seemed to approve, its winds softer, its creatures less wary, as if the mountains themselves blessed this unlikely family. Months passed and the cubs grew. Ember's coat gleamed like burnished copper, her movements bold and fearless. Thorn, broad-shouldered and brash, wrestled with Sable until the cabin shook. Mist, elusive and quiet, watched from corners, her pale eyes missing nothing. Alara marveled at their transformation, but a shadow of unease grew within her. Bobcats were not meant for cabins. Their claws tore at the rugs, their teeth gnawed the furniture, and their eyes began to linger on the open door, drawn to the call of the wild beyond. Sable sensed it too. Her once gentle nudges became sharp, her growls laced with urgency, as if she knew the day was coming when her charges would no longer need her. One evening, as the sun bled crimson across the peaks, Alara sat by the fire, Sable at her side, the cubs sprawled across the hearth. She spoke softly to them, her voice a weave of stories, tales of the forest's heart, of spirits that danced in the moonlight, of the balance between freedom and belonging. The cubs listened, their ears twitching, but their gazes drifted to the window, where the first stars pierced the dusk. Alara's heart ached. She knew the time was near when she and Sable would have to let them go, but the thought of the empty cabin, the silence where their chaos had been, was a weight she couldn't shake. Then came the night that changed everything. A storm rolled in, fierce and unyielding, its winds howling like a pack of wolves. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the forest in stark whites and blacks. Alara woke to a sound she couldn't place. A low, guttural rumble. Not thunder, but something alive. Sable was already at the door, her fur bristling, her claws unsheathed. The cubs, now nearly full-grown, stood behind her, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. Alara grabbed her lantern, her heart pounding, and opened the door to the tempest. Outside, the forest was a maelstrom of snapping branches and swirling leaves. The rumble came again, closer now, and Alara's blood ran cold. It was no animal she knew. Not a bear, not a wolf, but something older, something primal. Sable snarled, her body low, and the cubs mirrored her, their instincts awakening. Alara's lantern flickered as she stepped into the storm, her voice lost in the wind as she called to Sable. But the lynx was already moving, leading the cubs into the dark, toward the source of the sound. Alara followed, her boots sinking into the mud, her heart torn between fear and trust. The forest seemed to shift around her, the trees bending as if to guide her path. She caught glimpses of Sable's silver fur, of Ember's fiery leap, of Thorn's powerful stride, of Mist's ghostly form. They were a pack now, moving as one, drawn to a destiny Alara couldn't see. The rumble grew louder, vibrating in her chest, and as she crested a ridge, she saw it. A massive shape, indistinct in the storm, its eyes glowing like twin moons. It was no beast of flesh, but something other, something that belonged to the myths Alara had whispered to the cubs. Sable stopped, her body taut, and the cubs flanked her, their growls a chorus of defiance. The creature turned, its gaze locking onto them, and Alara felt the air thicken, as if time itself had paused. Then, with a sound like the earth splitting, the creature lunged. Rain lashed Alara's face, the storm's fury a living thing that clawed at her skin and roared in her ears. The creature loomed before them, its form a shifting mass of shadow and sinew, as if the forest itself had birthed it from roots and rage. Its eyes, twin orbs of pale fire, burned through the darkness, pinning Sable and the bobcats in place. Alara's lantern swung wildly, its light fracturing in the downpour, casting jagged beams across the scene. Sable's snarl was a low, unbroken thread of defiance. Her body coiled like a spring, while Ember, Thorn, and Mist fanned out, their movements synchronized, their eyes gleaming with a wildness Alara had never seen. Her heart thundered, torn between the urge to call them back and the knowledge that this moment was theirs, not hers. The creature took a step, its massive paws sinking into the earth, leaving prints that steamed in the rain. It was no mere beast. Its form flickered, now bear-like, now wolf-like, now something else entirely, as if it wore the skins of every predator that had ever stalked these mountains. Alara's mind raced, pulling at the threads of old stories her grandmother had told her. Tales of the Wendigo, the Skinwalker, spirits of hunger and vengeance that guarded the wild's deepest secrets. This was no myth, though. It was real, and it was here, its breath a hiss of frost in the warm autumn air. Sable moved first, a silver blur darting to the left, her claws raking the creature's flank. It roared, a sound that shook the trees, and swiped at her, its claws missing by inches. Ember followed, her fiery form leaping onto a fallen log, then launching at the creature's face, her teeth bared. Thorn charged head-on, his broad shoulders a battering ram, while Mist, ever the ghost, slipped into the shadows, her pale eyes glinting as she circled. Alara stood frozen, her hands trembling, the lantern's light wavering. She wanted to scream, to run to them, but she knew this was their fight, their test. Sable had raised them for this, had seen something in them that Alara hadn't, until now. The battle was chaos, a dance of fang and claw under the storm's relentless drumbeat. Sable weaved through the creature's strikes, her movements fluid, guiding the cubs with flicks of her tail and sharp yowls. Ember's boldness drew the creature's attention, her snarls taunting it, while Thorn's brute strength kept it off balance. Mist struck from the dark, her claws silent but deadly, tearing at the creature's hindquarters before vanishing again. Alara's breath caught as she saw the harmony in their movements, the way Sable led without dominating, the way the cubs fought not as individuals but as a pack. They were no longer the fragile orphans she'd cradled. They were warriors, forged by Sable's fierce love and the forest's unforgiving lessons. But the creature was relentless. It shook off their attacks, its wounds closing as if woven shut by invisible hands. It lunged at Thorn, catching him with a glancing blow that sent him skidding through the mud. Ember's scream pierced the night, and she threw herself at the creature, only to be swatted away, her body tumbling into the underbrush. Mist darted in, her teeth sinking into the creature's leg, but it kicked her free, her slight form crashing against a tree. Sable's growl became a wail, and she leaped onto the creature's back, her claws digging deep, her body a shield for her fallen charges. Alara could bear it no longer. She dropped the lantern, its glass shattering, and ran forward, her voice breaking as she shouted their names. Sable, Ember, Thorn, Mist. The creature turned, its eyes locking onto her, and for a moment, she saw not malice but recognition, as if it knew her, as if it had always known her. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the storm's roar fading to a whisper. Then Sable sprang free, landing beside Alara, her fur matted with blood, her eyes blazing. The cubs staggered to their feet, battered but unbroken, and flanked her, their growls a unified challenge. The creature hesitated, its form shimmering, as if unsure of its own existence. Then, with a sound like a sigh, it dissolved into the rain, its body unraveling into mist and shadow, leaving only a faint glow where its eyes had been. The storm broke, the clouds parting to reveal a sky strewn with stars. Alara fell to her knees, her hands reaching for Sable, who pressed against her, warm and alive. Ember, Thorn, and Mist gathered close, their breaths heavy, their bodies trembling but whole. Alara wept, her tears mixing with the rain, her heart swollen with relief and something deeper, pride, awe, and a quiet fear of what they had just faced. Days passed, and the forest returned to its rhythm, but nothing was the same. The cubs, now fully grown, no longer tore at the cabin's rugs or gnawed its beams. They lingered at the edges of the clearing, their eyes fixed on the horizon, their bodies taut with a new purpose. Sable watched them, her amber gaze steady but tinged with sorrow. Alara knew the truth now. The creature had been no enemy, but a guardian, a test of the cubs' readiness to claim their place in the wild. Sable had known, perhaps from the moment she brought them to the cabin, that her role was to prepare them, not to keep them. One morning, as dawn painted the peaks gold, Alara opened the cabin door and found Sable waiting, the cubs behind her. Ember stepped forward, brushing her head against Alara's hand, a farewell as fierce as her spirit. Thorn followed, his nudge rough but warm, a promise of strength. Mist, ever elusive, met Alara's eyes for a fleeting moment, her gaze a silent thank you. Then, with Sable leading, they turned and vanished into the forest, their forms blending into the trees until they were gone. Alara stood alone, the cabin silent, the hearth cold. She waited for Sable to return, as she always had, but days turned to weeks, and the lynx did not come. The forest whispered of their journey, of a pack that roamed the high ridges, led by a silver shadow with amber eyes. Alara listened, her heart heavy but full, knowing Sable had chosen the cub's path over her own, had given them the freedom she'd always promised. And sometimes, on nights when the wind sang through the pines, Alara swore she heard a familiar growl, a reminder that love, even in the wild, never truly fades.